It was the year 1837. The place was Natchez, Mississippi, a town that smelled of river mud and tobacco smoke, where the air itself felt tired from carrying too many secrets. And in the middle of that silence stood the Blakewell plantation, wide and white and cruelly beautiful. The kind of place that shone under the sun but reeked of rot beneath the wood. And there, inside its kitchen, was a woman named Mary of Natchez. That was her name. The woman who would one day sing in the fire and never be seen again. She was 26 years old, her skin the color of the soil she worked, her eyes dark like the river at midnight. Her hands were scarred from iron pots, her voice soft but heavy, like something too old for its years. They said Mary could cook anything, that she could make even hunger taste like peace. But what they didn't know was that she could make silence sing. At this hour, before dawn, the sky is a bruise. The fog drifts low through the fields. A whip cracks somewhere far off, a sound too familiar to startle anyone awake. And from the kitchen comes a hum, a tune, low and trembling, the kind that sneaks under your skin and makes you remember pain you thought you forgot. Mary hums while she works, not loudly, just enough to fill the room. The flames rise in the hearth, gold licking against black iron. She watches the sparks climb. She feeds them wood, but her mind is far away, somewhere beyond the river, beyond the fences, beyond the voice of Master Thomas Blakewell. Thomas Blakewell. That name carries weight like a hammer. He is the owner, the preacher of his own kind of God, the kind who never kneels. He walks through his house like the walls were built to hold his shadow, and behind him, his wife Eleanor Blakewell, soft voice, powdered hands, perfume thick enough to hide the smell of whiskey. They both believe in control. They both believe that silence means loyalty, but Mary knows better. Silence only means waiting. The kitchen door creaks. The boy Jacob, 12 years old, slips in. His bare feet are muddy. His voice shakes. "Mistress wants coffee, ma'am," he says softly, calling her ma'am the way the older slaves taught him to stay alive. Mary nods. She doesn't answer. She pours the coffee, black and bitter, into a silver cup that gleams like ice. When she hands it to him, her fingers touch his, cold, trembling. He sees the burn scars there. He doesn't ask where they came from. Everyone on this land has scars they don't explain. Outside, roosters call. The morning fog turns gold. The mansion hums with footsteps and whispers. Another day of orders. Another day of yes, ma'am, yes, sir, and no trouble. Mary steps outside for just a breath of air. The fields stretch out before her, endless. The scent of wet soil mixes with smoke from the slave quarters. She sees Samuel the blacksmith hammering before sunrise, sparks flying like tiny stars. His back bends with rhythm. He looks up for a second, meets her eyes, nods once. No words. Just that, the kind of silence that speaks entire stories. She returns to the kitchen. The floor creaks beneath her feet. She notices the oil barrel left too close to the firewood. She moves it aside, slowly, carefully, but for a moment she stares at it, the way one might stare at a secret. Every morning feels the same, but something today feels wrong. The air heavier, the walls closer, the silence sharper. She sets the bread to rise. She wipes her hands. Then she looks toward the window, the one that faces the cotton fields. Her reflection stares back. Eyes tired, but alive. She touches the glass as if it were a doorway, and softly, she whispers a line from a song her mother used to sing. "Lord, take me where the fire can't reach, but let me burn if I must be free." She hums it under her breath. The melody curls around the room like smoke. By the time Thomas Blakewell walks in, the kitchen smells of coffee, ash, and fear. He slams his hand on the table. "You're late with breakfast," he says. Mary looks up. "Yes, sir." Her voice is calm, even. He narrows his eyes. "You still humming that devil's tune?" She doesn't answer. He steps closer. The smell of whiskey hits her like a slap. I said, "Stop that humming." She looks him straight in the eye, just for a second. Then she lowers her head. "Yes, sir." But when he leaves, she hums again, softer this time. Low enough that only the fire hears her, because the fire is the only thing that listens. Outside, the sky bleeds into morning. Inside, the kitchen walls hold the smell of wood, salt, and something faintly chemical, like oil. A small droplet drips from the corner of the barrel she moved earlier. It seeps into the floorboards, invisible. Mary doesn't notice it, not yet. She wipes her hands on her apron, looks toward the door and exhales. Her voice rises again, steady, haunting. Each note bends, breaks, and rises again, like breath through flame, like memory refusing to die. This is Mary of Natchez. This is where her story begins. A woman whose silence was mistaken for surrender, and whose song would one day become the sound of vengeance. Before we continue with the story, drop a comment telling us where you're from and what time it is over there. And don't forget to subscribe, because what comes next will burn. The air in Natchez is heavy that summer, the kind of heat that sticks to skin and memory. Even the trees seem tired. The sun hangs low, slow, cruel. Every sound feels slower too. The creak of the gate, the soft moan of insects, the dragging footsteps of those who carry weight that does not belong to them. Mary works without speaking. She chops onions until her fingers sting. She scrubs pots until her arms shake. The others talk around her, but she listens, always listens. She listens to the walls, to the steps above her, to the rhythm of the river outside. When she hums so low, it feels like the ground itself is singing back. The others tell her to stop. They tell her it is dangerous. They say Master Thomas hears everything, even in his sleep. But Mary does not stop. She cannot stop. Because that song, the one that crawls up from her throat, it does not belong to her anymore. It belongs to the dead. Her mother's name was Lydia. Lydia, who used to sing while she cooked, who would close her eyes and pretend she was somewhere else. Mary remembers the sound of her voice, strong, trembling, like the wind through tall grass. She remembers the day Lydia was caught praying in the field. The overseer said, "No prayers here, only work." But Lydia kept singing, and for that, they whipped her until her back opened like pages in a book. Mary was 6 years old. She hid behind a wagon and watched her mother fall. Every lash left a note, and every note became part of the song Mary carries still. After that, they sold her to another plantation where the days had no names. Then again, until finally, she arrived here at the Blakewell estate, a young woman with eyes that did not cry anymore. Thomas Blakewell liked her because she was quiet. His wife Eleanor liked her because she did not speak back. But neither of them understood what it meant when a woman is silent too long. Mary met Samuel there. Samuel, the blacksmith. Tall, patient, with a voice deep as thunder. He worked in the forge behind the main house, hammering metal from morning until the stars rose. Sometimes, when the moon was kind, Mary would bring him bread. They would sit by the fire, not touching, just talking softly, about rivers, about roads that led north, about freedom that sounded too beautiful to be real. He promised her once. He said, "We will run, Mary. When the harvest ends, we will go." She believed him, but harvest never ends when you are owned. One night, the overseer found Samuel sneaking into the storage shed. He said Samuel was stealing silver spoons. Everyone knew it was not true. They hanged him by the forge. They left him there all night. When morning came, his body swayed in the wind like a broken bell. Mary saw him from the kitchen window. She did not scream, she did not run, she just watched. And then she began to hum that same song her mother used to sing, low, trembling, defiant. The same one she would one day sing inside the thumb. After that day, Mary never spoke again. Not to the others, not even to herself. She only sang. There are rumors among the slaves about her voice. Some say when she hums, the dogs go quiet. Others say the air gets cold. Some say it sounds like a prayer that has lost its God. At night, when the house sleeps, she sits by the window of the slave quarters. She looks toward the big house, white and perfect in the moonlight, and she hums to it like she is warning it, like she is telling it something it does not yet understand. She remembers the smell of Samuel's forge, the smoke, the iron, the burning wood. She remembers his hands, the way they shaped fire into tools. And she whispers his name, slow, like a prayer. Samuel. Lydia. Samuel. Lydia. Every name a heartbeat. Every heartbeat a step closer to something she cannot yet name. The younger slaves whisper about her. They say she talks to ghosts, old Martha. The cook before her shakes her head and says, that girl carries a storm inside her chest. She is right. Because the fire Mary cooks with every day, it no longer feels like warmth. It feels like memory. It feels like a promise. One afternoon, while Eleanor Blakewell reads in the parlor, Mary is ordered to polish the silver set. She wipes each piece until she sees her face reflected back, small, distant, trapped behind metal. The room smells of lilac perfume and decay. Eleanor glances up. You have a lovely voice, Mary, she says, trying to sound kind, but the words fall like dust. Mary does not reply. Eleanor's smile fades. You should be grateful. We saved you from worse places. Mary's hand tightens around the cloth. Her voice is steady when she finally speaks. Yes, ma'am. Then, quietly, you saved me from nothing. Eleanor blinks. What did you say? Mary shakes her head. Nothing, ma'am. The next day, Eleanor tells her husband that Mary is becoming insolent. Thomas laughs. She will learn. That night, when the kitchen is empty, Mary lights the stove again. She stares into the fire and whispers to it, as if it were alive. The fire was not made for food, she says softly. It was made for memory. Outside, thunder rolls over the river. Rain begins to fall, slow at first, then heavy. The roof leaks. The wind pushes through the cracks in the window, carrying the smell of wet soil and old iron. She stands there, watching the fire hiss and flare with every drop of rain. And in her mind, she hears her mother's voice again, strong, unbroken. Sing. Mary, even if they silence your mouth, sing. So she sings. The sound fills the kitchen, echoing up the stairs. Thomas Blakewell hears it in his study. He freezes. His whiskey glass trembles in his hand. He swears he hears a woman's voice, but it does not sound human. It sounds like the earth itself is mourning. He calls for her. No answer. He storms down to the kitchen, but by the time he arrives, the room is empty. The fire burns low, and the air smells of smoke and rain. On the table lies a single spoon, the silver one. Eleanor loved most. Its handle is bent, its surface blackened. Thomas stares at it, confused. He tells himself it means nothing. He tells himself she is just another servant. But that night, he cannot sleep, because in the dark, he swears he still hears her song, drifting through the halls, low, soft and endless. And somewhere outside, Mary walks through the rain, her bare feet sinking into the mud, her voice blending with the storm. Every drop that hits her skin feels like a warning. Every breath feels like a countdown, because something inside her has already changed. And soon, the song that should never be heard will become the sound that no one will ever forget. The storm has passed, but the air is not cleared. It hangs thick and metallic, as if the world itself is waiting for something to snap. The river runs dark that morning, swollen from rain. Mist clings to the earth. Every sound feels sharper, heavier. Even the crows are quiet. Mary wakes before dawn. Her clothes are still damp from the night before. Her hands ache from work, but her mind does not feel tired anymore. Something inside her has gone still, too still. She walks to the kitchen in silence. The door creaks open. The smell of smoke and salt hits her face. She sees the spoon she bent yesterday lying where she left it. The black mark on its surface catches the light. She touches it once, then sets it aside. It is Monday, but it feels like the world forgot to turn the page. The field hands move slower. The overseer shouts louder. The Blakewell house is restless. Something invisible presses against the walls. Eleanor Blakewell walks through the kitchen late that morning, her perfume drowning out the smell of cooking grease. "Mary," she says, "the mistress from the neighboring plantation is visiting this week. We will have guests. Everything must be perfect." Mary nods. "Yes, ma'am." Her voice is calm. It always is. But in her head, something new begins to whisper, a rhythm, a thought, a plan. Later, Thomas Blakewell enters the kitchen. He tosses a muddy glove onto the counter. "Where is my breakfast?" His words hit the air like stones. Mary places the plate in front of him without a word. He looks at her, eyes narrow. "You think you are too good to answer your master?" Mary's gaze lifts, slow and steady. "No, sir," she says softly, but the calm in her voice feels like defiance. He steps forward. His shadow falls across her face. "Do not test me, girl. You remember what happened to Samuel." The name slices through her like glass, but she does not flinch. She just stares back. And in that moment, Thomas Blakewell sees something in her eyes that he does not understand. Something not afraid, something awake. He laughs. "You are lucky I keep you here. Another man would have sold you long ago." Mary wipes her hands on her apron, turns away and whispers under her breath, "Then maybe another man would still be alive." He freezes. "What did you say?" She looks back. "Nothing, sir." The silence stretches long enough to break. He grabs her wrist hard. She does not scream, she does not move. She just stares at his hand on her skin. Then slowly she pulls away. He walks out without another word. But his face stays red. His steps echo down the hallway like gunshots. When he leaves, Mary looks down at her wrist. A red mark blooms there, shaped like a brand. She presses her fingers over it, feeling her own pulse beating under the bruise. Something inside her shifts, quietly. That night, the house sleeps. Rainwater drips from the roof into a bucket, steady, rhythmic, like a ticking clock. Mary sits alone in the dark kitchen, her candle flickering. The floor creaks. The wind moves through the chimney, moaning like a voice that cannot find its body. She whispers into the silence. "Lydia. Samuel." She says their names until the candle burns low. Then she opens the storage cabinet. Inside, oil, cloth, old tools. She takes one of the kerosene jars, turns it in her hands, and studies the way the light bends through the liquid. She sets it down. Then she picks it up again. She unscrews the cap. The smell rises, sharp, chemical, dangerous. She breathes it in. The jar feels heavier than it should, not because of the oil, but because of what it means. She hides it beneath the sink, behind the firewood. From that night forward, Mary moves differently. She listens to the house. She learns its sounds, the way the floorboards creak near the stairs, the way the locks click at night, the way the wind pushes against the shutters. She notices how the flames bend when she opens the back door, how quickly the curtains catch dust, how fast the candles burn when the windows are closed. Every detail is a note in a song only she knows how to play. Days pass. The guests arrive. The house fills with laughter that sounds like lies. Eleanor. Blakewell glides through the hall smiling. The women praise her home, her dresses, her manners. None of them look at Mary except when they need something. None of them see her at all, but Mary sees everything. She sees how the guests' carriages are parked near the barn, blocking the back exit. She sees how Thomas Blakewell drinks too much and leaves his cigar burning on the tablecloth. She sees how the night wind slips through the open windows, pulling the curtains closer to the flame. It is all becoming part of the same rhythm. That night, after everyone sleeps, Mary walks barefoot through the hall. Her steps make no sound. She passes portraits of the Blakewell family, faces frozen in oil and pride. She stops in front of one painting, stares at it. The firelight flickers across their painted smiles. "They called it mercy," she whispers, "but it was always hunger." Her reflection in the glass seems to look back at her, calm, certain, final. She turns away, returns to the kitchen. The moonlight slips through the window, falling across the table, the jars, the matches. She picks up the flint striker, the one the blacksmiths used to start their forge fires. It fits perfectly in her hand. She strikes it once. Sparks jump and die in the dark. She watches them fall, glowing for just a second before vanishing. And for the first time, she smiles. Not out of joy, but out of certainty. "The flame is not for warmth," she says softly. "It is for remembering." Her mind drifts back to Samuel, to Lydia, to the sound of the forge, the sound of hymns through pain. She feels them near her, not as ghosts, but as purpose. Tomorrow, the house will be full again. Tomorrow, she will cook for them one last time. Tomorrow she will sing, not a whisper, not a hum, a song, the one they silenced from her mother, the one they buried with Samuel. She will sing it so loud that even the fire will listen. She closes her eyes, takes a long breath and sits by the dying flame. Outside, the sky bleeds into dawn. Inside, the air smells of smoke, oil, and inevitability. Mary opens her eyes and watches the first light crawl through the window. Her voice rises again, low and trembling. One for Lydia, one for Samuel, one for every name they buried. And when she stops singing, the silence feels heavier than sound, because silence, in this house, has finally learned how to burn. Midnight Natchez. The air is wrong, too still, too heavy, too ready. The moon hides behind a thin curtain of smoke already forming above the tree line, as if it knows what is about to come. Mary stands outside the house she once cleaned, the house she once sang in, the house where her chains had no sound, because she learned to move without them. In her hand, a jar of oil. In the other, a rusted lantern, trembling, not from fear, but from the wind, a southern wind that always carried secrets before it carried fire. The crickets stop. The world holds its breath. Even the Mississippi seems to wait. Inside, the men sleep, those who once laughed when she cried, those who called her girl even after her back had aged, 20 years before her time. Those who burned her husband's hands because he taught another to read. Mary remembers every name, every insult, every crack of the whip. She whispers their names like verses of a song, slow, deliberate, powerful. Her lips move not in prayer, but in promise. She steps closer. The jar shakes once, then stills. She pours the oil at the base of the steps, the same steps she used to scrub until her hands bled. The same wood that once soaked in her tears now drinks in the oil like it had been waiting for it. Inside, someone coughs. Another turns over in sleep. The house is full of the sound of ignorance. Deep, heavy, careless sleep. Mary lights the lantern. The flame dances inside the glass, small and alive, like a child that doesn't yet know what it's capable of. She looks at it, her eyes glowing orange in the reflection. "They called it cleaning," she whispers, but it was really erasing. She kneels, her knees sinking into the dirt she's known all her life. "But tonight," she says, voice trembling with control, "tonight, I clean my name." She tips the lantern. The fire doesn't roar at first. It sighs, like breath leaving a tired body. Then it grows, crawling up the steps, licking the edges of the porch, whispering against the walls. And then, it screams. The boards pop and split. The shutters slam open like startled eyes. The first window bursts, glass exploding into the air like 100 forgotten voices finally shouting at once. The men inside wake too late. One shouts her name, "Mary!" But she doesn't move. She stands in the field, her figure outlined in firelight, small, still, unmovable. The screams begin, one by one. The voices she knew so well twist into terror. The overseer, the man with the scar on his jaw. His voice cracks first. Then the foreman, the one who made her sing to entertain guests. His song ends tonight. And finally, the master himself. His window glows red before collapsing inward. Mary watches. Her eyes do not blink. She does not cry. She just watches. The flames reach the roof. Curling upward, wild and hungry. Sparks shoot into the sky, joining the stars, turning the night into a trembling, living thing. The smell of pitch and pine, of smoke and sweat, fills the air. She feels it on her tongue. Bitter, sharp but clean. The fire doesn't just destroy wood. It devours history. It eats portraits, curtains, ledgers, every record of who owned who. It eats laughter that never belonged to her. Somewhere behind her, the others have gathered, quiet, ghost-like shapes in the darkness. The other enslaved souls. They do not speak, they only watch. And when Mary begins to sing, soft, trembling, beautiful, they join her. It is not a hymn of sorrow. It is a song of ending. Her voice cuts through the crackle of flame like a blade through silk. Her words are low, almost a hum, but they carry. Over the fire, over the field, over the years, the melody rises, steady, haunting. It is the same song she was once forced to sing at the master's table. But tonight, the meaning has changed. Every word now burns. Every note is freedom. The wind shifts, the fire jumps. The roof collapses inward with a long, thunderous groan. A shower of sparks rains over Mary, lighting her hair in a crown of red embers. She does not move. She keeps singing. They called it mercy, she says between verses, but it was really silence. She steps closer to the blaze, feeling the heat press against her skin. Her voice grows louder. Her song becomes a declaration. It becomes a storm. The house gives way completely, walls folding in on themselves, beams breaking like ribs. The sound is unbearable. And yet, in the middle of it, Mary's voice remains pure, unwavering, unstoppable. One by one, the figures behind her fall to their knees, not in prayer, in awe. They understand what she has done. They understand what she has freed them from. When the last beam falls, Mary's song fades into the roar. Her silhouette glows against the inferno, the woman who burned her name into history. And when the wind finally takes the fire toward the sky, she walks forward into the flames, not running, not screaming, walking as if the fire were a door she'd always meant to open. The others cry out, reaching for her, but the heat drives them back. Mary turns once, her face calm, illuminated by gold and red. Her lips move one last time. They cannot hear the words, but they know them. Now I am free. The fire consumes everything, the house, the records, the blood-stained floor, the ghosts. And when dawn comes, there is nothing left but smoke, ashes, and silence. But even that silence carries her voice, because those who survived swore they still heard her singing. Far into the morning, a song in the ashes, a voice in the fire, a freedom no chain could bind. The morning after the fire, Natchez woke to a sky the color of bruised smoke. Ash drifted down onto the river, floating like gray snow. The air tasted of pine and sorrow. The house that once ruled the fields was gone. Only a blackened skeleton stood where pride had lived too long. People came from miles around to see what was left. They whispered her name, soft, fearful, reverent. Mary, they said. Some said she died in the fire. Some said she escaped across the river that same night. And others said she became the fire. The sheriff came, notebook in hand, boots sinking into the wet earth. He found no body, only a single rusted chain, melted at the end, twisted into something like a broken bracelet. It was small, too small for a man. He kept it, and when no one was looking, he touched it, just once, and felt the heat still inside. The town buried what they could: pieces of iron, black glass, bones that might have belonged to anyone. But they never spoke of her again in daylight. At night, though, the stories grew. They said if you stood by the river at midnight, you could hear her singing, the same song, soft and low, rolling through the cypress trees. And when the wind carried it, even the bravest men went quiet. Weeks passed, then months. The ashes turned to soil. Grass began to grow where the house had burned. And in spring, wildflowers bloomed, bright red, like drops of memory that refused to fade. The people called them Mary's Fire. For years after, new owners tried to rebuild on that land. But every time they struck a hammer, something went wrong. The wood split, the nails bent, and once, the builder's son woke screaming that a woman's voice had called his name from the empty field. The story spread beyond Natchez, to Vicksburg, to Jackson, to New Orleans. It traveled on wagons, in whispers, through letters no one signed. Every version changed, but one thing never did: the singing. Always the singing. They said her song was not of death, but of justice, not of vengeance, but of balance. The melody carried a rhythm that made people remember things they had tried to forget. And those who had once been silent began to hum it under their breath, in kitchens, in fields, in churches with doors half open. Years later, when the war came and men in blue marched through the South, some soldiers said the locals met them with that same song. They didn't know where it came from, but they said it made the air shake. The way thunder shakes the horizon before a storm, they called it the fire hymn. But the elders in Natchez knew better. They said it was Mary's voice, still burning, still rising. One of the women who survived that night, old Sarah, told her grandchildren the truth. She said Mary never meant to burn herself. She meant to burn what kept them bound. But when the fire grew, she didn't run. She stayed, because she knew the story would not live if she lived. And so she became the story. Every generation after remembered her differently. Some painted her as a ghost, some as a saint. But the ones who knew the pain, the real, wordless pain, they called her freedom. The historians came much later. They wrote books, papers, essays about the Natchez fire, about the lost slave woman, about a tragic rebellion. They measured her act in pages and dates, but none of them ever understood the song, because the song wasn't for them. It was for those who had been told they had no voice. It was for every woman who cleaned floors until her reflection disappeared. Every man who carried his dignity in silence. Every child who grew up learning that obedience was safer than truth. The fire took everything, but it gave back a story, name, a reason to remember. And even now, when the wind moves through the ruins of Natchez, it carries a faint hum, a soft, trembling note that doesn't belong to the earth or the sky. It belongs to her, to Mary, because Mary of Natchez didn't vanish that night. She became the wind that fans every spark of rebellion. She became the silence before the flame. I became the proof that a single voice, even when trapped, can set the world on fire. If this story still burns inside you, it's because freedom always leaves embers. And if you hear her song tonight, listen, that's not a ghost. That's a memory refusing to die. Before you go, tell us where you're watching from. What time is it where you are? And if Mary's voice reached you, if her courage shook something inside you, don't let it fade. Share this story. Subscribe to the channel, because stories like hers, they're the reason we remember. They're the reason we're still here.